Heavenly brethren, forgive you 77 times. So listen true, don't misconstrue your enemies' deaded minds. Sever the ties with men that bind you and confine you. A devilish rhetoric and lies forever blind you. Listen to divine truths and find proof for dying youths. Of the dying troops and lying goofs that oversee them. Now I'm supplying soothe, I'm sober heathens. Know your readings, the goal of my speeches is redeeming noble demons. Each time I'm speaking I'll show you freedom. The globe is bleeding, so I seek minds that are glowing beacons of olden regions. Like Vimanas, soul teachers of a golden legion. Control the prana, it flows deeper than you know. It's gleaming in your soul like teachings of the holy.
Peace. The reason I put up these videos is to till the ground of our beliefs, because it is our beliefs, our opinions, and our preconceived notions that really need to be tilled in order for truth to be revealed. And so all of these different methods that I point and show are really there to break up the ground of your old beliefs. And you have to do the tilling. So the more and more that these things get broken down, because truth cannot be given to you like, here's truth on a platter and it be received. Truth is already in existence. It is existence. So what has to happen is everything that is veiling you from it has to be slowly broken down and broken down and broken down until finally truth is revealed. And so today we'll be looking at the non-existence of the material world, or the material world does not exist. And at first glance of the title, it would be like, okay, this guy has gone too far. But we must look at it deeply. And we can all look at it because we all experience what we call it. All right. And so there are many methods of pointing you or showing you this truth. And so I will go through a few different methods to show you or to point you to this truth, right? And so one of the reasons, and especially in the East, they will use a method called the snake and the rope, right? If you walked into a dark shed and you seen a little rope coiled in the corner, at first glance you might think it's a snake and you would get frightened, right? And you'll be frightened until you see the reality that it was never a snake, that it was a rope. So the snake was an illusion. It was not real. The reality of the quote unquote snake was the rope. And it's similar to the world. You know, we think the world is real until we see it for what it truthfully is. And since most of us take it to be real, we are bound to it, right? And so these examples I will be giving shouldn't be taken for more than what they are. Mere examples or pointers pointing us or giving us a microcosmic example of the macrocosm, or a small example to point to the reality of existence, of the greater. So this Hindu sage said, the world is an illusion. God is real, and God is the world. Now this quote seems like a contradiction, but actually it's giving you three, it's basically telling you that what you take of the world to be is an illusion. Only God is real. It's pointing you to the truth, and then it's telling you what you think is a world is only the presence of God, right? And so one of the ways of showing you this is a an illustration of a pot. Okay, you have a pot, and with this pot, you have the material cause of the pot, which is called clay. So you have a quote-unquote clay pot. And so the pot is made of clay. In and out, up and down, through and through. When we look at the pot in respect to the clay, all we see is that the whole pot is clay, every inch of it. Matter of fact, there is nothing in the pot which is not clay, okay? And so clay is the only reality there. You cannot find a pot separate from the reality of the clay. Meaning, if I'm walking around town and I'm holding up this pot in my hand, everybody will say, well, that's a pot. But all I'm actually holding is clay. And so pot is just a name given to the form of the clay. In reality, it's just clay. And so when this Hindu sage says God is the world, in reality, all we know is God. But we call it a world as if it's something that is real. Like the world is real and God is somewhere else off in the corner. No, everything that is seen, felt, touched, thought of, sensed, everything is God. And so, with this clay pot, there is no pot independent of the clay. And to show you the reality of the clay as opposed to the pot, if I crushed the pot, would the clay, the pot disappears. Once the pot is crushed, there's no longer pot. But there still remains clay, because clay is the reality. And now what we have is another name and form, which we'll call rubble. You know, just pieces of clay. But clay is still that's all there is clay. And so it is this with the world. All the names and forms are nothing but God or being. It's the same with life. All the names and forms, they are constantly coming and going. But the essence of everything is this beingness or isness or what they call God. All the religious texts. And we'll go and look at a direct experience to see that this is the case. So my claim is that the material world does not exist. All there is really God, or what we call spirit, right? But we look at life as if there's a material world separate from us, and the spirit is in me, right? But we'll see that. Hopefully, we'll see that this is not the case. And imagine right now, you can look at anything, but right now I'm looking at this brown table in front of me, right? All there is to this brown table, the four legs, the top of it, it's nothing but wood. It's only wood. And this is what I mean by it's only God, in that when I say the world, the material world does not exist. It's almost as if I'm saying the table does not exist. It is only wood that exists. For instance, take a table, a brown table, four legs, right? And I'm saying there's nothing but wood here. You're saying, no, that's a table, right? But I can break the table and make a plank. And now there's no longer a table, but the wood still remains. Or I can take the plank and take the four legs and make a chair with the same wood. And all these different forms, as it appears to change into different forms, from a table to a plank to a chair, but it's always, every inch of it is always wood. It is nothing but wood. And so the wood never changes. It's eternal, right? I'm just giving these symbolisms, or this example is an example of when people read about God being eternal. And then somebody will say, well, the world is God. But, well, the world changes. Well, do you just see how I gave you an example of how I can take a wooden table, which is nothing but wood. It's the substance that cannot change. It's the underlying reality that doesn't change, yet it is all of it. I can change it from a table to a plank, back to a chair, and it always remains as it is. Nothing more, nothing less. Nothing but wood. Yet the names and forms change, and this is the same in life. You take yourself to be a name and form. You are actually the wood taking yourself to be the table. You are actually the spirit, the eternal, but you take yourself to be a name and form that changes. And so we are bound in this, right? It's the same, it's similar to a dream. I like using dreams as an example because life is nothing but a longer dream, but it doesn't register to most people. So when we look at the world in a dream, right, we see, we taste, we hear, we smell. We use all our five senses in a dream. Yet there is nothing outside of us that we are perceiving. So let's look at this example in the physical world. See, there's a principle in the schools of the East, and even some esoteric schools, that say all is mind, right? And I like how a friend of mine out in England puts it. He says all is mind, but mind is not the all. Meaning everything perceived is mind. What we call a material world is not really a material world independent of mind. And anything we perceive is perceived by mind. Can you perceive of a world existing independent of mind? You can't, because all perceptions appear in the mind. This is why they're called sense perceptions. They are only perceptions. They're not perceptions of something outside. They are just mental perception or sense perception. What am I saying? What I'm saying is, all you know of the outside world is hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, and smelling. These are sensory perceptions. So where do these five things happen? Do they happen somewhere outside of you or closer than close? What I'm saying is seeing. Where does seeing take place? Where does hearing take place? Smelling. It's closer than close. And let me use this example because this is how it is, but it's hard to really grasp the concept that I'm trying to relay. Let me put it in a Western way. Without a mind to perceive anything, that perception cannot exist. Let me repeat that. Without a mind to perceive the sun, there is no sun. So suns only exist in minds, right, of men. Water only exists in mind. Colors only exist in the minds. Hearing only exists when there's a mind there to perceive it. And so we see the fundamental foundation of the world. The world relies on a mind. Not only the mind of a human, the mind of an ant, the mind of any and every sentient thing. It needs a mind to perceive it. And so, in actuality, let's just take one of the senses. Seeing has seeing in the seen, because we divide these things. We divide one thing called seeing and another thing called seeing. Seeing and seeing, excuse me, hold on, I messed that up. The seen and seeing are one thing. They're not two things. Words divide them. How do I know this? Have there ever been something seen independent of seeing? No, the seeing depends on seeing. And has there ever been someone seeing without something being seen? No, these two are one. They're essentially one. And so if I'm using this analogy, seeing and the seen, we make it seem as if they're two things, but they're actually only one thing. And so seeing is not independent from the seeing. And where does seeing take place again, I ask? Seeing takes place within you. Just as if we're looking at a landscape on the television screen and we see a sun and mountains. And if I was to ask the screen, if the screen was aware, screen, how far are the mountains from you? You know, if the screen was an actual person, the screen, if you had the same view in front of you, you would say, well, them mountains are about 5 miles away. But the screen, the mountains are closer than close. I mean, the mountains are the screen, and vice versa. Even that thought that says it's 5 miles away is nothing but your beingness. And so, this is what I mean by the seen and the seeing are one. There's a substance that relates them. Okay? Because if something seen was independent of seeing, then it would exist independent of seeing. But nobody has ever experienced it independent of seeing, whatever it is. And so seeing and seeing are one thing, but it goes further back. Because what is seeing made of? Seeing is made of pure knowing, a pure consciousness, pure aware of it, aware of the seeing and the seeing, and aware of this division that we call it. But it's not really a division, because everything seen is nothing but objects of the mind. Whether it be colors and sounds, these are objects, mental objects. They're not something outside of us. Hearing is only heard through minds. Through being aware of them, which the essential nature of mind is being aware or knowing it. Nothing has ever been known independent of the perceiving of it, or the awareness or consciousness of it. And so everything is consciousness, because there's nothing that isn't this substance we call consciousness, or different formations of it. How do I know this? If we look at, again, the example of the table, I know brown. I know the formations of it. It's made of knowing. It's known. Even when I label it a table, this is known. Everything is known, or everything is, I'm aware of it. And so it is nothing but awareness. Even if I go up and touch the table and I sense something I call hardness, this is known. So everything is made of this spirit. Even when we feel hardness, this is nothing but a form of this knowingness, or this beingness. This is not something outside of beingness. There is nothing outside of this isness, or this godness, what we call it. Or, like we said, clay. Because this knowingness and beingness, which are one and the same thing, is all there is to life. Whether you feel the sun, you know it, and it is. Whether you have a cold, you know it, and it is. Whether you have a headache, you know it, and it is. Whether you see the grass, you know it, and it is. Whether you smell the air, you know it, and it is. Everything is knowing and isness, or what people call pure consciousness. That's all there is to what we call the material world. What we call the material world depends on human, not even human, but since we're humans, I'm speaking in this term, but it depends on awareness. The world is dependent on this aware beingness to exist. That means the world depends on something. That means it's less real than what it depends on. Does that make sense? Meaning it relies on something before it. What does awareness rely on? If you think on that one, what does pure awareness rely on? Because thoughts and feelings and labels and worlds and forms and sounds, they all depend on the knowing of it. And the knowing and beingness of all things is the deepest part of you. This is what you are. And everything else is a form of it. And so when we understand ourselves to be this core, this consciousness, opposed to the material world, right? In the material world, what we label the material world is nothing but sense perceptions, and sense perceptions are in the mind, and mind is made of nothing but knowing, so everything is knowing. The material, once it's proven that the material world cannot exist without consciousness or one experiencing it, right? So what then is consciousness experiencing? What is it an experience of? If what it experiences has no independent existence apart from it. And so what we come to find is only consciousness is. That's all there is. And so all is pure consciousness. Just like all in your dream is pure consciousness, but we'll label it mind because the mind projects these things. You know, we give certain labels to different formations of this pure spirit. And then when we give them names, we take them to be real and independent of their substance or their source. Like I was reading this book the other day, and it made a great point about a statue. Like if I took a slab of rock and made a statue and carved it out so nice and made, let's say, a statue of, let's call it Michael Jordan, right? Now everybody who walks up, wow, that's a beautiful statue of Michael Jordan. So once they have seen the form and it's been given a name, they have forgotten the reality of the name and form, which is, this is only rock. All it is rock in essence. But you have given life to this name and form, and now it's like the name and form have overtaken the essential, or it has veiled the essential substance of what it is. It's just rock. Right? And this is how we lose the truth of existence, by the names and forms of life. And so with that, I think I've spoken enough. Peace.